by Asiata Digital Labs. The topic of today's podcast is how blockchain, Web3 and NFT along with artificial intelligence bring new value to businesses. I am Liyanage and I'll be your moderator for today. ADL AI Summit focuses on the future of AI and how its developments drive business growth. So the theme of this year's summit is Metaverse and talks about how AI and Metaverse affect different industries and drive them into the future. So the AI Summit consists of three main segments. First is the four-part educational podcast series which started on the 14th of November. Then we have the AI Forum, which will feature keynote and panel discussions from AI experts and will be live streamed on the 18th and 19th of November. And lastly, the Geeks Hangout will consist of interactive sessions designed by global experts to develop AI and machine learning skill sets. So now, moving on to the theme of today's podcast. How blockchain, Web3 and NFT along with AI bring new value to businesses. Today's podcast is sponsored by OneLexiicon. Blockchain, Web3 and NFT. Three of the hottest buzzwords used this year. Did you know that in year 2021, the United States alone have invested $2.2 billion into blockchain solutions? Not only that, 1 in every 10 Americans collect NFTs. So, these facts alone show us how much the immense potential that these technologies have. So today, let's focus on how these technologies in convergence with artificial intelligence bring value. So here with us to discuss the topic, we have two very special guests. Our first speaker for the day is Brett Hornung. Brett is an Innovation Strategy Manager of the Blockchain and Multiparty Systems Technology Innovation Group, Accenture. He is specialized in finance, corporate finance and investments, and is also a certified NFT expert and blockchain solution architect. Hi Brett, welcome to the ADL AI Summit podcast series.
Hello, thank you for having me.
And our next speaker for the podcast is Dr. Madhusanka Liyanage. Dr. Madhusanka is an assistant professor and a director of graduate research at School of Computer Science, University College Dublin, Ireland. He is also an Astra Fellow and a Marie Curie Fellow. His main research interests lie in the field of 5G, 6G, blockchain, network slicing, and IoT security. Hi, Dr. Madhusanka. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello, everyone. So, thanks for having me.
So, before we move on to the discussion, I'd like to remind the audience that you can direct any question or doubts you have in the chat of the podcast, and I will direct them to the speakers later during the Q&A session. Blockchain. Not only it is a word that is commonly used by tech enthusiasts and experts in the field, but it is also something that a lot of laymen and newcomers into the field are interested in learning. So, Brett, how would you break down the term blockchain?
Yeah, thank you. So as it has been for quite some time, that is still the million-dollar question, right? That is what everybody wants to know. So let's start with a quick definition, but then we can get a bit more functional and make it real. So blockchain really is a newer type of database system that maintains and records data so that multiple stakeholders can confidently and securely share access to the same data and information. Now, in most systems today, that data is siloed and you have to do reconciliations, like reconciliations are required, where blockchains help to solve that issue. And they do so in a way that allows users to come to a consensus over data and assets. So essentially, blockchains and other forms of distributed ledger technology or multi-party systems attempt to create a shared source of perceived truth between two or more parties. So at the very basics, blockchain was originated to solve the double spend problem. how do we ensure that our assets are not double spent in the digital world by coming to global consensus between a network of stakeholders? So there's many different types of blockchain that exist. In blockchain or distributed ledgers or multi-party systems, they can have different flavors and different definitions based on who you talk to. But some things you might hear in the market are enterprise versus not, public versus private, permission versus permissionless, well-governed versus less governed. There's a lot of different characteristics that can make up a blockchain. But what's important to understand is that there are a wide variety of technical designs and implementations to achieve roughly the same goal. So if we look at two kind of comparisons and some of the things that we'll talk about today, right? In the more B2B world, oftentimes we have private or permission blockchains where a group of businesses are coming together to leverage the technology to share data and to create a single source of truth in business processes. They're using platforms like R3 Corda, Hyperledger Fabric, Hyperledger Besu, etc. If you think about more of the B2C world, what you see in the news, right? Oftentimes these are public or permissionless blockchains like Ethereum and Polygon and Solana. And these are used by participants to come to consensus around assets that they are moving through that network and to understand the provenance of those assets. So to kind of sum it up, blockchains and other forms of distributed ledger technology are really changing the way we interact and share data. That data could be our identities, our assets, our objects, but it allows us to do that in a verifiable and secure manner in the digital world for kind of the first time, preventing that double spend problem. So while the technology has created networks of where businesses and individuals can come to solve problems together, it's still a very exciting and new space that is still to be defined. But blockchain itself, over the past decade, has really started to change the way that we interact with each other. And that's the biggest takeaway. It's a new paradigm for how we interact, both in the business sense as well as in the consumer sense.
Thank you, Brett. The way I understand it, blockchain revolutionized the world because it has some very beneficial and unique qualities to it. Dr. Madhusanka, what are some of the prominent characteristics that you see in blockchain?
Yeah, actually, Brett has given like a very nice introduction about how the blockchain and a good definition. So when we look at like what are the characteristics, so I think one of the interesting characteristics of blockchain is the decentralization. So we have a decentralized system. We can create actually decentralized system using blockchain. With that, we get like some benefits like, okay, no single point of failure. And we can also eliminate of centralized authority to control the system. So that means no third-party person's requirement. And also we can make the system transparent. So everyone involved in the ecosystem can see what is happening in the blockchain. So I think the decentralization is like one of the key characteristics of blockchain. And another thing I find is the blockchain is it can increase the capacity. That means a blockchain is a nice platform. We can interconnect a lot of computers or a lot of processing units to work together in order to achieve a common goal. So we can have like a great power in processing, storage, and also networking domain. So we essentially increase the capacity of the system. And another idea of blockchain, like a benefit of the blockchain, is the better security. So, of course, instead of having a centralized system, when we have a decentralized system, we can have a better security because you can replicate the data in multiple places. So then we can have better repetition of the data. So that means your data will not lost because of the attack in one single node. So multiple nodes will participate in securing the data. And also another thing is like blockchain is providing the immutability and the accountability. That means whatever the data you store in the blockchain will be immutable. So that means later somebody can go and change this data. So that is very important if you want to have some kind of verification of the data, or when you want to protect the integrity of the data. And the second thing it can provide is the accountability. So we know who has entered this data into the blockchain. So we know where this data has been originated. So nobody can later say, okay, I'm not responsible for data, or this is not my data, or anything like that. So we can ensure the accountability is also in the blockchain. And on top of that, I mean, this is not like one of the basic features of blockchain, but blockchain has enabled the smart contract. So smart contract is not a new thing. It was introduced maybe like 20, 30 years ago. But the real utilization of the smart contract has become popular with the blockchain. So when you integrate smart contract in blockchain, so you will be able to have a lot of services automated, especially based on the reliable data which are available on blockchain, we can run this smart contract. And also it gives the opportunity to create a new set of like decentralized application. We call them as DApp. So we can also create this kind of application using smart contract. And last benefit, I would say, I think this is the one of the reasons this blockchain become popular. So it has the ability to do successful minting. That means blockchain is like one of the key platforms to enable the cryptocurrency. So we were trying to enable the cryptocurrency for like years, but blockchain was the most successful technology to support this efficient minting. So I think these are like the main characteristic of blockchain and why it is becoming popular in the world.
Thank you, Dr. Madhusanka. So now, Brett, following up on that, I'd like to ask a question that a lot of viewers from the audience might likely have. How are blockchain, Web3, NFT, and cryptocurrencies related, and how are they different from each other?
Yeah. So as I mentioned before, right, blockchain is this database system which is enabling multiple stakeholders to confidentially share access to the same data and information, right? And so we take that as the core, right? It is that exchange layer that enables us to do this. It's the persistence layer per se, right? One of the ways in which blockchain can do this or can enable the sharing of data is via smart contracts and tokens. So we just heard about smart contracts, right, as the business logic that enables us to encode the behavior that we're allowed to do within a certain process flow, right? And then there's tokens, which represent like the units of value that we're moving across these networks. So when we talk about blockchain-based tokens, we're typically referring to a digital representation of rights and obligations that when exchanged by owners can transfer financial, functional, or social value. Okay, and so it's important to understand, right? We're exchanging tokens on these networks. And there are different types of tokens that exist across a spectrum of fungible to non-fungible and a hybrid of everything in between, right? So you can have both fungible and non-fungible in the same token type. But applications of these token types is where we see these words come up, right? This is where you see things like stable coins, cryptocurrency, digital art, in-game assets, virtual land, etc. Right? These are the products that are using that underlying technology, the underlying token types, and these are what you're interacting with if you're familiar with this in the market. So since you asked, right, cryptocurrencies, when talking about how they're viewed in the market, these are typically financial in nature, and normally these are fungible tokens. And NFTs, or non-fungible tokens, while this term is actually a tad confusing as it refers to a specific token design choice, and it probably needs an updated name, but for purposes of this conversation, right, it stands for non-fungible tokens, which people use as a bucket acronym to stand for things like digital collectibles, digital first products, and the other things that you see in the NFT market. And these are typically not financial in nature. They're more focused on non-financial assets, but they can have that aspect, right? And so each of these terms, blockchain, cryptocurrency, and NFTs, are all related. They refer to different things inherently because they are different parts of this process, but they are related. Because in the blockchain world, blockchain is that data layer with the smart contracts encoding the business logic and tokens moving the value. And so they're all working together. So you can imagine cryptocurrencies are moving across this network. NFTs are moving across this blockchain network, right? And so they're just different applications of tokens which use blockchain to be able to exchange value between the different parties that are involved. Now, Web3, right, is a kind of cultural movement that is pushing us to use blockchain and other distributed data technologies to move value, to give ownership, transparency, portability in how our digital identities, money, and objects move across blockchain or other distributed data networks. So they are all related. They are different in their own regards, but they are all related as they help us to facilitate that shared exchange of our data.
So, listening to all of this, we understand how much potential these technologies have. But what if someone asks, why do we need blockchain? Why can't we just stick with the conventional system? Dr. Madhusanka, how would you answer that question?
Yeah, I think we have to understand actually why this blockchain was created in the first place. So even though this blockchain become popular in the last maybe like 10 to 15 years, but the original concept of blockchain was introduced back in 1991. So in that time, so there was like two scientists, Stuart and Scott from IBM. So they wanted to create some kind of database way in order to secure timestamp data or cryptographically secure timestamp data. So they are the person actually who created the blockchain. But the blockchain hasn't come to the mainstream until 2008. This Bitcoin become popular. I think the main reason is like it was used in the Bitcoin for the minting and enabling the cryptocurrency. Because as I mentioned before, like we were trying to enable the cryptocurrency for many years, but the problem with if we use non-blockchain kind of scenarios, verification and traceability of these multi-step transactions, which is enabling this cryptocurrency, was difficult, or they were not reliable. Especially we were facing like kind of like double spending kind of attack. So it was not easy to deploy that kind of system. But with the Bitcoin, by using blockchain, there was a successful system has been developed in order to create this cryptocurrency. So I think that motivates people to use blockchain over the centralized system. And these features like verification and traceability in the multi-step transaction or multi-party transaction has been utilized in other systems like let's say supply chains or NFT or any kind of application. So we can use this, and this is like the main benefit like blockchain can provide over the centralized system.
Thank you, Dr. Madhusanka. So before we move on to the next section, the organizers, along with our sponsor for the podcast, OneLexiicon, would like to announce that at the end of this podcast, there will be a small quiz where the audience can answer and get the chance to win an exciting prize worth $1,000. So be with us and make sure to give it a try. Artificial intelligence. It is the simulation of human intelligence in machines where they are programmed to think like humans and mimic their actions. So up to now, we talked about how blockchain, Web3 and NFT benefit us separately. So Brett, how does this convergence of these technologies with AI bring value?
Yeah, so the convergence of blockchain and other distributed ledger type technologies with AI is actually quite exciting. And when it gets to scale, it's even more exciting, right? So blockchain's ability to securely expand an AI implementation's access to data across organizations, right? Across is the big word there, will drive a whole new set of insights and value. So in addition, right, the usage of AI in emerging consumer products like dynamic tokens and generative art is also an intriguing overlap. And so that we can start to see that there are use cases on both the B2B side as well as the B2C side where these technologies do intersect. So we think about, how do we identify value? Well, I think the best way to do that is to maybe run through a few examples to demonstrate like where these two technologies might come together. So if we take an example where we imagine a kind of doing smart energy with smart buildings. So imagine we're in a smart city. We're using blockchain to share data to improve the life of citizens from data sources across the city. And think about an AI system in which through that citywide data that we're getting from the blockchain can be used to maintain a smart building, such as overseeing energy usage by considering factors like the presence and the number of residents in the building, the seasons of the year, and even traffic information. And to supply the energy for that building, blockchain could ensure transparent and cost-effective transactions between producers and consumers, while the machine learning algorithms of AI could be honing in on transactions to estimate pricing. So you start to see the combination of the two working together, where blockchain's helping to deliver transparent access to a wider source of data that sits across just one organization or siloed data sets, and AI is running the processing on top of that to improve the overall user experience and the building management process, right? If we take another example and we think about the insurance industry. So if you've ever been in an auto accident and you have to exchange insurance information with another party, right? You know that your two insurance companies need to exchange data. Well, what if we had a mutually beneficial system in the insurance industry where anytime there was an auto accident, that information could be shared? And then on top of that blockchain network, where that you had all the major insurers, the auto insurers sharing data, right? You had a secure system that with appropriate governance that was running models on top of it to predict, is there fraud? Is there double claims being spent here? And that's a mutual benefit for the entire industry, right? That can report out, hey, you might have fraud, you need to investigate. And so you can start to identify those cost savings that blockchain data at the network level versus at the company level, plus the AI models that have that much wider set of data, right? You can start to benefit entire industries. If we think about it from the consumer lens, so if you're familiar with the non-fungible token space as it's called today, right? There's a big push to use it in the digital art space. So this is where generative art comes in, and how people are using algorithms and outside data sources to create unique digital art that they're then selling as part of the digital art movement in the form of a token. And so you start to see that it's like a pretty cool use case for how AI can inform the metadata that goes into a token. And then finally, if we take a fourth example, just to really hone in on some of the value that we might see here, as we start to, and this is a bit more futuristic, but as we start to think about smart homes and IoT devices, and as that network scales out, right? Well, what if we have a smart home that's connected to a blockchain, and we have AI systems inside the house that are able to actually identify, they're able to act, they're able to interact, and they're able to transact, right? And they're able to use the blockchain to execute those transactions. So say we have sensors that are widely prevalent, and say we have a smart refrigerator, and that smart refrigerator notices that we are out of eggs and we need to order more eggs. Well, that application can then trigger a transaction to the blockchain to execute the purchase of eggs. Again, streamlining your user experience, making your day-to-day life more easy, and just a better overall experience. So I think that both AI and blockchain are not necessarily new technologies, but the emergence of them working together and the emergence of, or in their maturity coming in at the same level, are both exciting. And they're even more exciting when they're put together because of the potential that you can have from that processing power, but also from the access to such a wider swath of underlying data. So these two digital technologies can create synergies, I think, in the business world, unlike we've ever seen before, provided you get the right privacy in place, the right governance in place, you follow the specific regulations that you need to. But when you do put them together from both a business side and a consumer side, the outcome is pretty phenomenal and pretty mind-blowing with what they can do.
So following up on that, I feel that these benefits are bidirectional. Dr. Madhusanka, how can AI and blockchain help each other evolve?
Yeah, actually, it's a very interesting question. The Brett has explained like how AI and blockchain can integrate it very nicely. So I think you can understand like one of the big benefits Brett was highlighting. Okay, we can eliminate the data silos and we can use more data in order to create a better AI system or take better AI decisions. So I think that's like the first benefit. Like, okay, blockchain can eliminate the data silos and provide more data for we can have like better AI algorithm. But here there's a problem. So the thing is like, even though okay, we can use in order to share the data via blockchain, people is not ready to share the data. They are a little bit hesitant to share the data. There are some reason behind that, because one reason is like we need to protect the privacy, and users should have the control over their data. They are not ready to give up the data to anyone to use and without any control. So in this regard, actually, the blockchain has like a perfect system. So we can protect the privacy of the data, and also we can keep the control of the data, and we can ensure like unauthorized access can be provided. And another system, like when we go for like AI systems, we need reliable data. I mean, if you look at like any AI system or federated learning or machine learning system, very typical attack is the data poisoning attack. That means you are inserting poisonous data and you can destroy the whole AI system. So how we can ensure this data is reliable and useful? So we can use blockchain in this regard. So we have like blockchain-based system like voting-based systems or reputation-based blockchain system has specifically designed in order to ensure the integrity or the usefulness, and also like how well it contributing for the AI algorithm, especially like in federated learning or even machine learning scenario. And also the blockchain can also improve the security of the machine learning system. For example, there are typical attacks on AI systems like data poisoning, model poisoning, or many more attacks, and also privacy attack like membership interference or time inference. So those kind of attacks can be also eliminated with the help of blockchain, because you need a third party entity to collect the data and having some kind of data sharing in order to have design intelligent security mechanism to protect against these attacks. And blockchain can provide these third-party view or like a global view in order to create a better security solution. And when we look at like, okay, how AI can help in the blockchain domain, I think one of the critical issue like we are facing in many blockchain platforms is like how efficiently we utilize the resources. We have a lot of resources, computing or storage or networking, but if you don't use it properly, it will be a disaster. So we know in the Bitcoin, we are facing the issue of the high energy use. So, and these kind of issues can be eliminated using AI algorithm. We can understand like, we can design AI model in order to have better prediction of this resource utilization or resource allocation. And also we can remove like, we can eliminate like underutilized resources for other purposes. So those kind of things can be enabled. And also another things that blockchain can support is the decentralized intelligence. That means especially like in 5G or 6G domain, like we are talking about edge computing. That means you can enable some kind of AI algorithm already at the edge of the network. But the thing is like how you can ensure these AI algorithms are decentralized AI algorithms are trustworthy and operate in the intended manner. So in this case like it will be helping the blockchain in AI domain. And also it can also improve better transactions, like which transaction to be included and what are the most critical transaction, and or the prediction of this, how these transactions are coming, how the data will be included in the blockchain. all of these things can be predicted using AI models. So that's basically how AI can be help to the blockchain in order to have better blockchains in future. Yes, I think.
Thank you, Dr. Madhusanka. So now let's take a small break and join back after 3 minutes. We are back with the podcast. I would like to remind that the audience will get the chance to win an exciting prize worth $1,000 by answering a small quiz that will be asked at the end of the podcast. So, moving on to the discussion. We have now come to the most awaited section of today's podcast. How blockchain and AI together create opportunities in the real world. So I feel that a common misconception is that blockchain is limited to the field of finance. So Brett, looking at the big picture, how would you say that blockchain is used in different industries?
Yeah, no, great question. And hopefully kind of as I provide some of these insights, like you can start to think like, where does AI plug in these different use cases as I go through them, right? So I think what's important before I kind of go into the specific industries is to start with that, blockchain at the end of the day, while it's a super exciting technology, it's still a technology. And so it enables us to do really cool things and to build new products and services. But it's important to understand that, it can be used across many different use cases. And we want to make sure that when we are building blockchain applications, it's the right technology. Because oftentimes there are better technologies that solve that problem or traditional technologies. But as we look at these different use cases, it's important to understand that these are some areas where we've seen real life use cases that drive real business or consumer value. And so with that said, right, blockchain used across a bunch of different industries. So let's get into some. So just starting first, if we start with supply chain, and supply chain stretches, I know, across every different industry, but just looking at some specific types of use cases, asset provenance. So how do I actually track and trace assets as they move through a supply chain? So whether that's luxury goods and tracking things like handbags, watches, diamonds, how do I create a system that allows me to move that through my supply chain to verify provenance, right? If I think about industrial supply chains, so how do I track my pieces that move through my manufacturing process or through my existing supply chain that ultimately allows me to produce my goods? Another common use case is the pharma track and trace. So there's been a lot of regulations in the pharma industry around serial track and trace. And there's different use cases that have emerged to prove provenance in supply chains. If we look at the fashion industry, if you follow the tokenization space and the Web3 space, right, you see a lot around digital garments and virtual clothing. So how do I buy unique digital assets that either my avatar can wear or that I can show off in these virtual spaces? In addition, something interesting that you're seeing in this space is around phygital products. So the combination of physical and digital. So maybe I buy the digital good and it allows me to redeem the physical good, or the other way around, right? And so I can start to have a different kind of product experience, right, with the brand, where it's no longer just I buy a black t-shirt, it's a black t-shirt, but now maybe that black t-shirt is a ticket in a virtual world, or it is my pass to an upcoming fashion show, right? You can start to see like products are becoming more than just that initial kind of purchase and brand interaction. I mentioned it earlier, insurance. So data exchange in the insurance industry, because insurance companies naturally exchange data. And they do it quite inefficiently today. So how do I create that network to exchange different types of information that I have to already as an industry? There's also the use case around things like proof of insurance. How do I validate that my insurance is actually active? It is actually my insurance, right? What technologies around tokenization or verifiable credentials could be used here to kind of to validate my insurance through this technology? If we look at the consumer goods and products industry, so kind of a wide spectrum, but a lot of the big brands that you see in the market today. So what kind of new digital first products can we build, right? So leveraging our existing IP, what might be some digital products that consumers would want to buy because they resonate with the brand, they have a sense of brand loyalty, and they want to, engage in the digital world, especially among the younger generations. Again, touching on that concept of phygital products, like what's the interaction between physical goods and digital goods? If we think about ticketing, what does ticketing become? instead of just a static ticket that maybe I collect, what can I do with a ticket? How can I use it? How can I redeem it long-term for long-tail loyalty? What does token commerce become, right? Because today, I buy my physical goods either online or I buy them at a physical store, and I buy my digital goods typically online. But where do I buy tokens? How do I buy tokens? What does that interaction pattern become? If we think about banking, there's been a lot, obviously, around payments. If you follow cryptocurrencies or central bank digital currencies or stable coins, there's a ton of use cases around remittances. Payments is arguably how blockchain really came to be, and it's one of the largest use cases that exists. Interbank reconciliations. So like I mentioned earlier when I was describing blockchain, right? Reconciliations is a big piece that blockchain helps to solve. So how can we improve the back office processes between the different banks? And then finally, trade finance in the banking space, right? So how do I digitize the trade finance process and kind of improve the different components that go into those different workflows? Within capital markets, you can look at clearing and settlement. So a lot of the major clearing and settlement houses in the world are implementing blockchain into their back office processing to improve processing times, to have greater transparency into where things are in the process, and ultimately to settle accounts. You can also look at tokenizing financial instruments, so things like equities, stocks, bonds. People are also looking at illiquid assets in tokenization around, real estate or carbon credits. Like, how can I start to tokenize those things as well? Another industry, right? If we think about the media and entertainment industry, less on the consumer side, but on the business side, right? Like, what about billing, processing, contracting, licenses? What are all the different things that I can start to do from a back office, maybe even more of a B2B function around blockchain? On the consumer side, how can I create new experiences with my consumers? Maybe I want to allow them to help co-create content, or I want to, distribute or democratize content creation, or how I pick pilot episodes or pilot shows. Another interesting concept that's emerged is around the to earn movement. So if you're familiar with the gaming industry, right? How do I play to earn? But in media and entertainment, maybe it's how do I watch to earn? What is that different interaction pattern that I might have in order to earn these types of tokens? Think about video games and in-game assets and video game skins, and what happens when these video games eventually start to become interoperable, or they become interoperable with different virtual worlds. And then finally, token gating access to content. Like, maybe instead of a username and password and me buying a subscription, me buying a token in a market, now when I present that token at my favorite news site, I have access to all the content, right? Just by owning that token. So what does the different consumer brand paradigm become when we start to have tokens? And so you can see, right, there's many more use cases across all other industries as well, but it's important to understand that there's a wide range of applications for blockchain. It's important to make sure that we identify, what the value is and why we're using blockchain. But at the end of the day, there are applications that use different types of blockchain technology to go to market. There are applications that satisfy consumer needs, but also satisfy business needs, right? This is not just limited to one type of persona. It actually, blockchain has a plethora of use cases that could make sense based on your business and technical requirements. So if you ensure that, if you follow that, what is the value, you identify the process flows, what are the touch points, and if blockchain makes sense, right, there is a lot that blockchain can drive from operational efficiency.
Thank you, Brett, for that very descriptive answer. It captured a vast range of industries. So now if we focus a bit more on a specific industry, let's take telecommunication, for example. Dr. Madhusanka, how do you see the role of AI and blockchain in the next generation 5G, 6G?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Actually, the blockchain can offer various benefits in this telecommunication domain, especially when we talk about 5G or 6G, which like the future generation of mobile networks. So one of the area I can discuss is the spectrum allocation. We know as the telecommunication industry, the spectrum is quite important. But as per today, like most of the time, like the spectrum is allocated in a static manner. So there's a regulator, you are selling the spectrum for the mobile operator, but it is not the optimum way of sharing the spectrum. We know like the spectrum is underutilized sometimes, and most of the time, like the spectrum is utilized only like 14% of the time, and most of the time it's underutilized. So we need to have like better utilization of this spectrum. So one of the solution is this dynamic spectrum allocation, and dynamic spectrum allocation is there for a long time, but it is not implemented because we need to have like a trustworthy system in order to enable this dynamic spectrum allocation. And also we need some kind of mechanism where you can have like ad hoc kind of contract between different operators. And also we need to have a mechanism in order to detect any kind of misuse or violation of these spectrum sharing agreement. So in this regard, I think the blockchain is a like ideal solution in order to enable this kind of scenario. So we can get rid of the telecommunication operators, and we can create a blockchain-based marketplace in order to sell and also buy the spectrum between the different users. And also we can use smart contracts in order to establish the contracts between the different buyers and the sellers who try to sell the spectrum. And also we can use like blockchain-based monitoring system in order to detect this kind of spectrum violation. We can use some kind of reputation system in order to ban the people who are violating the spectrum. So this is like one use case where the blockchain can play a bigger role. Another area like we can see is the roaming and offloading. So when you go for like roaming scenarios, so usually mobile operators has the dynamic, static agreement with the visiting country roaming service provider. But probably the visiting country roaming provider will not have the best connectivity on a particular moment. But you don't have an option to change the operator because you have kind of static agreement between the roaming country operator and also the home country operator. And these kind of scenarios can be easily eliminated using the smart contract. So we can use AI in order to detect which mobile operator has a better connectivity on the particular location on the particular time, and we can use automated smart contract to establish this roaming agreement. So then you don't have to restrict your users when they are roaming to another country for one particular operator. You have the whole spectrum of operators available in order to enable the roaming. And also, if you talk about a new concept of local 5G operator or private 5G network scenario, where the idea is like, since the 5G is enabling like cheaper deployment of mobile core network, so it is possible for even like industries or hospitals or universities, they can operate their small scale mobile network because now it's cheaper to deploy the core network. So that's pushing towards new concept of this private 5G or local 5G operator scenario, but it is not possible for this local 5G operator or private 5G operator to operate standalone manner because they still need to rely on the mobile network operators. Probably they have to get the spectrum for their location. Probably they have to get some of the core network services from the mobile operators. And in this kind of ecosystem, also blockchain can play a bigger role. One of the advantage is the marketplace. So again, the selling the spectrum, not only the spectrum, but also the services, maybe the core network function, cloud-based VNF or cloud-based network services. All of these can be sold via this marketplace, and also the mobile operators can buy these things. And also local 5G operators can need to know which mobile operators has the better reputation, who can provide the better service. So we can use blockchain in order to create a reputation management system in order to identify these kind of local 5G, this kind of better MNO. And also we need to have some kind of financial transactions. So those can be done via the cryptocurrency. And that is also very interesting. And another area, like we can talk about this data management, because we know 5G and 6G is all about how we are interconnecting IoT devices. We are going to interconnect like billions of trillions of IoT devices in mobile network. Then there's a problem of like how you can manage this data and how you can share this data and how you can use this data in AI systems. We have extensively discussed like how the blockchain can help on this regard. And another thing is like when we interconnecting these IoT devices into the mobile network, we cannot go the traditional route of interconnecting the users, because now when you need to connect to the mobile network, you have to register with the mobile operator and you have to register your device or either buy a SIM card or those kind of approach. But this scenario is not going to work when you are trying to interconnect billions of IoT devices. And we need new ways of identifying the users, authenticating the users, and also authorizing the users. And also like we need to issue a certificate for these users in order to get access to certain services. And in this scenario also blockchain is an ideal solution. Now we know a blockchain systems are running with millions of users. They are perfectly managing the user identities. We can provide like unique identity for each and every user. This concept can be directly applied in the IoT domain as well, especially when you do need to handle like the session fees or the utilization fees. That can be also handled via this cryptographic identity we can assign to the via the blockchain. And also, if we talk about like a more advanced concept, like the 5G and 6G network is going to utilize a new concept called network slicing. That means in order to support more and more different type of services, you have to create a different type of virtual network. So the network slicing is a scenario where you can create a different type of network with different network characteristics. And in this regard also, when you think about like end-to-end kind of scenario, user is using one service. So this kind of network slices cannot be created using one operator network. Maybe you need to have support for multiple tenants who contribute in order to create the network slice. We call this as a federated network slicing scenario. In this kind of scenario, you have to pick a part of the network slice from one operator, the second part from another operator, and so on and so forth. And this kind of scenarios, like there are like slice brokers who help in order to create this kind of federated slicing scenario. And in order to enable like secure and efficient federated slice brokering, blockchain is the ideal solution, because we need to have some kind of agreement or distributed trust between different operators in order to create this line. And blockchain is providing that distributed trust. And also it is providing accountability features, which is very important if something goes wrong. I think there are like many solutions we can develop on top of the blockchain. Infrastructure sharing or virtual network function sharing, AI data sharing. So we can enable all of these things using blockchain-based marketplaces. And also we can enable, improve the security, and also we can identify the fraudulent activities. So many areas like the blockchain can propose. I think I gave like a good couple of examples. I think that covers like why blockchain is important in 5G and 6G domain.
Yes, Dr. Madhusanka, we got a really clear view on that answer. So other than telco, another massive part of the industry that is relatable to each one of us is consumer products. Something that we don't expect is how much these technologies can affect the market of consumer products. Brett, earlier as well you mentioned this. So would you agree if I were to say that AI and blockchain can be the key factors in consumer product markets such as clothing or art?
Yeah, so I think it's definitely an emerging space with the recent maybe 18 months or so where consumer products are kind of at the front and center. And people are experimenting with how can AI improve our day-to-day experiences with things like tokens, which is the interaction point that we're having today, right? And so I mentioned this earlier. The biggest area that we are seeing right now with this intersection in consumer products is at the generative art intersection. So generative art, for those that don't know, right, it's a digital style in which artists use algorithms as a tool. And it's a tool to create the art. So there are several leading platforms out there that really do this, and they are able to produce art, using machine learning and blockchain native randomness, which creates kind of unpredictable or unique art. Now, there are risks that exist in terms of where you're getting that data from, what are the actual inputs that are going into this to make sure that you truly do own the output based on the inputs. But the concept itself is, kind of super cool, cutting edge, and that digital art is what is serving as the metadata in the media behind the token and then being sold. And there's a lot of well-known artists that are doing this. So you can think about it from the perspective of digital art. What does that become? How does it look like? How do tokens take in outside data sources to kind of update over time, right? There's a lot of different interesting avenues that are being explored. So in addition to digital art, there's also kind of projects that have emerged that aren't really centered around being digital art, but they're using a similar kind of concept around generative, right? So they're creating generative media to serve as the face for their loyalty program or to serve as the face for their digital first product that they want to create, but they want it to be unique based on a set of inputs that they're putting in. So they're using similar technologies to do that. And then finally, I mentioned fashion earlier as well. The fashion brands are looking at how can we use this kind of approach, so the combination of AI and blockchain, to create unique digital garments or fashion that people might want and resonate with as a kind of a digital forward look at fashion. So, there's these different areas where people are applying this approach of generative. I've also seen, so less on maybe a product, but more on a helpful consumer application. I've seen a few startups that are trying to use artificial intelligence to validate originals in this space, as this space, because of the mania, right, is kind of rampant with frauds and duplicates and copies and issues with copyright. And so they're basically scanning daily every single new token across many of the different blockchains that exist and scanning that media and then comparing it to existing tokens from verified collections and then saying, is this a fraud based on XYZ factor, right? And so they're really applying the powers of AI on top of that large data set that exists on these public networks. A third thing, which is similar to generative, but slightly different, is in the blockchain world, there's this concept of dynamic tokens. So dynamic tokens versus static tokens. So if you're familiar with, some of the popular NFT projects that are out there, the media doesn't change ever. The data behind it doesn't change ever. It's kind of static, right? What you get is what you buy, or what you buy is what you get. Dynamic tokens have the ability to evolve over time. And so some people are starting to explore, how can I use artificial intelligence as a means to feed that input to evolve that token over time. It's still kind of an emerging space, and I think people are more exploring there right now, but that is something that they're looking at for how do I use this to kind of inform consumer dynamic tokens. Finally, as it relates to consumers on this topic, right? And again, not as much a product, but more of a kind of a reporting or behind the scenes type consumer issue, is that public networks, right, are public and they have data on them and they have extremely large data sets. And so brands and organizations and even consumers can start to, create applications that use AI to read that publicly available information, and to understand what, consumer trends. What are people buying? What are people trading? What are they holding? What are they participating in? What are they actually doing with these tokens? And they can really garner a lot of insights if done correctly and done, within regulations and compliance. And so you start to see, like, yes, there are applications where AI can help feed, the customer experiences around fashion, around art, around community, around loyalty. But there's also, net beneficial services that can be provided to consumers and in and around consumers for organizations, that AI helps when you combine it with the power of having network level data. So it's again, very fascinating, very new, I think, on the consumer side, just because of how new the space is, from mass adoption in the consumer side, or not mass adoption, but like larger adoption in the consumer side.
Now, focusing on the theme of AI Summit 2022, Dr. Madhusanka, how does metaverse come into the play with AI and blockchain?
Yeah, okay, very interesting question. So I think this is something like a lot of researchers are studying this, like how we can combine AI and blockchain in the metaverse kind of scenario. So I think one of the interesting thing I'm thinking about, like the metaverse, like, so now metaverse applications are developed with the different people with the different platforms. So they are currently act as independent metaverses, not just a single metaverse. That is actually the single metaverse is something I'm expecting. Like we had like one internet. Before that, we have separate network, but it's become like one internet. So I hope the metaverse will also come to that kind of scenario. Now, as per today, so we have different metaverses operate by different operators. But in this kind of scenario, if we consider that particular scenario, so we need to move some of your asset from one platform to another platform, like how you can share some of the digital asset you are buying in one operator, one metaverse, and how you are going to use in the another metaverse. In this kind of scenario, so you need to have some kind of bridge between these metaverse platform, and this bridge can be enabled via blockchain. So we can ensure the trusted platform in order to transfer this digital asset between the different platforms, and blockchain can be an ideal solution to do that. And also another very interesting metaverse application is the digital twin. So digital twin is very interesting, especially in the industrial domain. So instead of doing your changes in the physical world, you can do the changes in the identical digital world and see how it will be going to affect on the physical world. But in this kind of scenario, so you need to transfer the sensory information from the physical world to the digital world. So that scenario, probably you need to have a trusted mechanism in order to transfer this IoT data. And blockchain has been used in this kind of application in order to secure this IoT data, protection of the integrity, and also providing the scalability and protecting the privacy and also protecting the security. There are many applications where this blockchain has already used in this IoT data management or IoT data transferring process. And this is like a direct application. So we can use blockchain-based scenarios in order to transfer the sensor information between the physical and cyber space. And AI can, on top of that, AI can be integrated in order to take intelligent decision and how we can optimize the physical world based on the things we are done in the digital world. And I think another interesting area is like this payment DApp or decentralized application. So that is a one way, like where you can transfer like the assets from the physical world to the crypto market, or if you want to buy NFT or something, so you can use this blockchain-based DApp or payment app in order to do these kind of application. And in the metaverse also, you have a lot of digital assets, so you need to exchange between the different users or maybe We need to have a platform where you can interconnect and buyers and sellers in this metaverse domain. And we need to have this kind of decentralized exchange or marketplace, which should be operated in the decentralized manner and also in a trusted manner. So we should have like a decentralized marketplace, which cannot be controlled by a single person. And we have seen blockchain has been used in order to enable these kind of marketplaces and also this transferring process, exchange processes throughout many different applications. So I think it can be also applied in the metaverse very efficiently. And also when you're transferring the digital asset, you need to have like individual intelligent decision. It's not like, okay, selling this data blindly. So you have to do it in the proper manner and in order to get better profits or also have like optimum result at the end. And AI can be integrated on top of this process in order to enable intelligent marketplaces. And I also discussed when we talk about like 5G and 6G, the identity management is very important. That is something we need to support when you have like billions of IoT devices or trillions of IoT devices. And this same problem is applicable in the metaverse also. In the metaverse, we have like millions of avatars and also many non-player characters which are included in the metaverse. And how you manage the identity of these things. And if you want to do some kind of modifications or even upgrade or even assigning some of the assets, you need to have identification for each and every avatar and the player in there. And identity management, it is something we can enable by using the blockchain. I think these are like the key benefits like we can achieve by integrating metaverse, so integrating AI and blockchain into the metaverse. I'm sure there will be like more and more benefits will be identified by with the time, because this is like very interesting field for the research.
Now we have arrived at the final part of the podcast. So far through the podcast, we saw that the convergence of blockchain, Web3 and NFT with AI creates so many advantages. But what are some of the challenges that this convergence add into the picture? And are there any feasible solutions? Dr. Madhusanka and Brett, what is your take on that?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so I can start. So I think one of the main challenge like integration and AI and blockchain, I think one of the things we have to consider is the security. So we of course say, okay, blockchain is secure and it can improve the security, but blockchain itself inherits some of the security issues, right? So because blockchain is a platform which is running on top of internet or other network. That means so we have to have like a secure platform in order to run the blockchain. So if somebody can attack this platform which is running on the blockchain, the whole blockchain will also fail. So that is some kind of like a challenge we have to consider. I mean, not just securing the blockchain is not about like securing blockchain itself, but also the securing the underlying platform. That is very interesting. And another issue which is going is like along with the security and also the next thing is the privacy. So we can say, okay, blockchain can provide a certain level of privacy, but not the full privacy. We call blockchain provide only the pseudo anonymity or the pseudo privacy. I mean, even though there are ways like you can identify the users, even though they use like the anonymous identities in the blockchain by analyzing the data, especially integration of AI can help us to have like more privacy issues, unfortunately, because we can analyze data efficiently and we can identify the privacy signatures from this data. But in this regard, I think we cannot rely only on the blockchain in order to provide the security and privacy. We have to bring in the other security and privacy mechanisms which are used in other systems. Let's say, talk about privacy, let's say differential privacy or home office encryption. These things has to be integrated in the blockchain system. So we cannot use like vanilla blockchain if you want to have privacy or security. So additional step we need to take. That is, I think, one of the challenge and challenge in order to solve if you're using blockchain and AI in any kind of system. So that is one problem I find. Maybe Brett can explain.
Yeah, happy to build on that. So definitely, the privacy is a major issue. I think, implementing either one alone, implementing AI or implementing blockchain, can be challenging, right? When you add the complexities of implementing both across multiple parties, you'll really have to be prepared for coordinated technology implementations and more complex interactions, right? So if we think about what are some of the issues, like we touched on privacy, and AI thrives on having oceans worth of data, and blockchain's really good at giving you oceans worth of data. However, we need to think about what are the privacy concerns around our actual usage of that data. What can we legally do? So it'd be interesting to see how that shapes out as we have network level data. I think on the consumer side, dealing with ownership. So I mentioned with generative art, like making sure that the inputs that we're using to generate this art is actually wholly owned. And so that way, for the outputs that we're creating as tokens, right, we have all of the proper ownership rights around that. Thinking outside the corporate box. So, most organizations today restrict access to their data. So if we think about this in the B2B setting, what's the business model change, or what's the process that you need to go through in order to be able to share that data for the mutual benefit, or for benefit across your industry? And then finally, kind of preparing for a huge mind shift, right? It does take a mind shift to do this, especially in a B2B setting. So just getting ready and preparing, I think. At the end of the day, finding a solution to these challenges will come down to a plethora of things across legal and regulatory and jurisdictions, but also across our companies ready to do it, our individuals and organizations ready to do it. Is the network data available? Are the blockchains available, right? And so only time will tell, I think, but it's certainly, the intersection of blockchain and AI is a fascinating space. So.
I think in addition to that, I would like to add a few more things actually. So one of the bigger question is like why the blockchain is not widely available and what the solutions are not available. I think Brett has initiated the reason like the feasibility. So the feasibility is one of the reasons like the blockchain, one of the biggest challenge. Like so, one I can find like there are several issues related to the feasibility. One of these things is like the lack of common standard. So if you don't have like a common standard in a global level, so the government or the other organization will not push this blockchain-based application further. So they're a little bit hesitant on that regard. So that is something like hinder the development. And another thing is like if you want to use the blockchain, it can be used only for the asset which can be digitized, right? So we cannot use it for any applications, right? So where you can do some kind of digitization of the assets or equity or data, that's the way the blockchain can be applied. And also like we need to have like a cooperation between the different stakeholders. We were talking about like breaking the data silos and sharing the data between different people. But it's still the real problem we face is like between these corporations has to be tackled in order to have fully benefit of the blockchain. That's another challenge that I find. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Madhusanka and Brett, for that very insightful answer. So I mentioned earlier that we have organized a small quiz at the end of the podcast where the audience get the chance to win an exciting prize worth $1,000. So now it's time for the question of the day. Majority of the AI applications include vulnerabilities in different fields, but using blockchain solutions, we can mitigate these vulnerabilities. Choose the correct answer with the right solution to the associated field. Answer A. Increase trust in AI data modeling using smart contracts. Answer B. Identity verification in AI applications using cryptographic linkage in blockchain. Answer C. Auditability in AI using time-stamped records. Answer D. Data and model sharing in AI using consensus algorithm. Answer E. Collective decision making in AI using distributed ledger. So the link to submit the answer will be provided to you through your registered email for the summit. So today we certainly gathered a lot of new information on latest technological concepts and their applications. So I'm sure a lot of you viewers would like the chance to interact with our speakers for the day. So let's move on to the Q&A session. So we have received quite a few interesting questions, and I would like to direct the question 1 to Dr. Madhusanka. Doctor, can we use AI to tackle blockchain frauds, example cryptocurrency frauds?
Yeah. Actually, it's a very interesting question. So, of course, like AI can be used in identifying these blockchain fraud. So there are actually some research already conducted in this regard. So especially we can identify like anomalies in these kind of transactions. So then in that way we can identify who's which kind of users or which kind of blockchain nodes are responsible for the fraud and more likely to do these kind of fraudulent activities. So we can use these anomaly detection kind of applications or systems in order to detect this kind of blockchain fraud. But I cannot say like, okay, it can detect all the cryptocurrency frauds, but at least we can do some kind of prediction. For example, if you can identify the patterns, like when these frauds going to happen, in which kind of situation it happens. So we can use AI to detect this kind of pattern, and then we can provide like proactive security mechanism or like proactive decisions to the users. So in order to mitigate these kind of fraud before this fraud happen. So that is like one area I can see like this AI can help on this blockchain fraud.
Thank you, Dr. Madhusanka. So, Brett, the next question is for you. What are the biggest problems or issues with blockchain and crypto field currently prevailing?
Yeah, so I think if you read the news, right, you'll probably see a lot of different things that people say. But what I would say is, having both experience in the consumer side as well as the business side, the number one thing that I think is needed in the space is a heavier emphasis on the user experience, right? So oftentimes we see that the user experience is left behind in search of whether it's quick to deploy or it's faster adoption or if it's financial rewards, right? And I think that's one big thing that we need in this space, especially on the consumer side where, education around the technology and the specific components may not be there yet. And if we truly want people to use these applications, to use these products and services, we need to focus on the human and how they interact. What's the delta to their existing experiences and offerings? Like, why are they going to switch to this? What is better with it? Putting that focus, I think, is like the most important focus area for this space going forward.
Thank you, Brett. So, Dr. Madhusanka, one of the viewers is asking, still blockchain-based solutions are not popular. Why is that?
Yeah, actually, this is good question, and I think I also explained this little bit at the last session. So the main reason is the feasibility. So I think in order to become in these blockchain-based solutions are like a very household thing. So we need to have a good standard, global level standard has to be defined, so where anyone can use this blockchain to any application. But for the moment, it is not possible, because even though blockchain is very interesting, you cannot use blockchain directly into most of the application. You need approval from the government, or you need approval from the standardization body even before you use it. For example, in banking system, if you want to use the cryptocurrency, you cannot do it. So you need to have approval. So this is kind of one reason like the blockchain is not popular, even though it has like a lot of benefit. And the second thing I think is we cannot use blockchain for all the application. We need like digital asset which can be digitized, so it can be trade between the via this digital world. So otherwise it is not possible to use blockchain. And the third and most critical scenario is like we need to have a supportive ecosystem. That means whoever the stakeholder part of this blockchain-based solution has to be cooperate each other. So still this industry, because of their financial problems or maybe like business strategy or because of the competition, they are not cooperating. So because blockchain is like a corporate solution in the most of the cases where you need to share the data between different users in order to have the optimal result. So that lack of cooperation between these stakeholder partners is also another reason like the blockchain solutions are not widely available.
Thank you, Dr. Madhusanka. So now I'd like to direct the fourth question to Brett. Will blockchain has a future without government sponsorships, especially when it has the potential to eradicate government corruption?
So I think, blockchain has the ability to bring together networks of individuals to set up networks that they believe in, whether it's a business to business or it is a consumer facing blockchain network, right? At the end of the day, the goal is to create networks that can operate, that have the right incentivization structures, that also have governance put into place, right? Because the way that you're able to come to that network and operate is how that network works. And so I think as you see in the industry, right, the pillars of society are still there. They're still going to be there. These networks will figure out ways to work within the paradigms of society, just as they are today. So I would say, like, to answer that question, right, like, regulations are a real thing. We have KYC and AML regulations. We have securities laws. We have other different things that are in place and in society, and blockchain companies are participating in today. It's different per jurisdiction. There's different regulations on blockchain globally. But I think that the pillars of society are essential to society and will continue to be.
Thank you, Brett. And now moving on to the final question of our Q&A session. I'd like to direct this question to both Brett and Dr. Madhusanka. What are the practical problems that can occur when working with blockchain, Web3 and NFT?
Okay, so I think I can answer about the blockchain domain. I think one of the practical problem is, especially like what we are trying to do is like, we need to have like a blockchain platform in order to enable most of these solutions. But the thing is like, we have only a very handful number of blockchain platform available in order to develop this solution. I mean, we have like Ethereum-based platform or Hyperledger-based platform, but they have like limited capabilities. For example, like, let's say you found like a new consensus protocol which is applicable for certain use case. but you cannot deploy that on these existing blockchain platforms. So probably you have to create like your own blockchain platform directly. So because you have less flexibility in these platforms. Of course, if you use whatever the available features directly, that is possible. But if you want to do like major changes to the blockchain, that might be one of the key issue I am facing, especially when we want to deploy new applications. So it's like flexibility is not so much available if you want to do like real changes to the blockchain. So that's I find like the biggest problem I'm facing these days.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, when it comes to blockchains and Web3 and tokenization, just like with other software, there's a number of things that can go wrong, right? Now, in blockchain, in permission world, right, you typically will put governance into place to handle, you know, the edge cases and to handle when things go wrong. You have processes and procedures that allow you to do different things to you know, kind of solve that. In the public world, that's a little bit less because things are theoretically there forever. So you can run into problems like that. It's important to just, I think, before you even run into problems, it's important before you start to understand what platforms exist. And if you're going to build on a platform, understanding the limitations of that platform. What are the trade-offs you're going with? Can it scale? Is it secure? Is it performant? Is there privacy? Is it resilient, right? That's a very illustrative and small list. There's a number of considerations that you want to take into place, but that can probably help you prevent a lot of the problems that you will run into in this space, or at least to put mitigations in place so that you're prepared when you do run into them. But I think it's important just, you know, at the end of the day, understand the platform that you're going to build on, understand what could go wrong, and do everything you can to prevent that from going wrong, and then have mitigations in place for when something does.
Thank you, Brett. Thank you, Dr. Madhusanka, for those very insightful answers. So now I will go through the question of the podcast once again. It will be shown to you in the screen as well. Majority of the AI applications include vulnerabilities in different fields, but using blockchain solutions, we can mitigate these vulnerabilities. Choose the correct answer with the right solution to the associated field. A. Increase trust in AI data modeling using smart contracts. B. Identity verification in AI applications using cryptographic linkage of blockchain. C. Auditability in AI using timestamp records. D. Data and model sharing in AI using consensus algorithm. E. Collective decision making in AI using distributed ledger. The link to submit the answer will be provided to you through your registered email for the summit. The winner of this quiz will be announced during the AI forum, so make sure to join with us during 18th and 19th of November. So now we have arrived at the end of today's podcast. I would like to thank the speakers not only for their time, but for the priceless knowledge they shared with us today. Thank you, Brett. Thank you, Dr. Madhusanka.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, this marks the end of the final podcast of our podcast series of ADL AI Summit 2022. I would also like to thank all the viewers who have been with us so far. So, see you all on 18th and 19th of November for the AI Forum. Thank you for joining with us. Have a great day.